I think I can record it.
See string theory as the one great hope for a theory of everything
Yep.
that will unify quantum mechanics and gravity, and so unify all of
that's
physics into one great, glorious theory of
Yeah,
everything.
grand unifying
Others
theory of
see
everything.
string theory as a catastrophic dead end, one
Well-
that has consumed a generation of geniuses
Yeah,
with
because
nothing
you're
to
all
show
depressed.
for it. So why are some
that's
of the
the
most brilliant
serotonin problem.
physicists of the past 30 plus years
You have to play
so
a game
sure
of negative 20
that string
questions, which you
theory
said on
is
PBS
right?
space-time. So the game of negative 20 questions is basically going to
Why
your
has
therapist.
string theory been the obsession of a generation of
And I said, you
theoretical
know what that is?
physicists?
That's quantum physics.
What
That's
exactly
hypotheticals
is
and
so compelling
counterfactuals.
about
Just
tiny
listen to
vibrating
John
strings?
Wheeler's theory.
In our last string theory
The
episode,
circuit.
I talked
said,
about what
basically
these things
imagine
really
a
are
dartboard throwing
and
a
covered some
dart at
history.
another dartboard.
In short, the strings of string
Okay,
theory
those
are
all the
literal
string theories.
strands and
Yeah,
loops
those waves
that
are
vibrate with
considering all
standing
realities.
waves.
That's the double split,
Simply by
quantum
changing the
erasure
vibrational
experiment.
mode, you get
Basically,
different
observation
particles,
partially
analogous
changes
to how
reality.
different
And I'm saying
vibrational modes on
your
guitar strings
observation
give
of
different
you moving around
notes.
the particles,
And, by the way,
the photons,
these
yeah,
strings
there you go.
exist in 6 compact spatial dimensions on
That's what I'm
top of the
saying.
familiar
You're
3.
observing reality.
In this
You're
episode,
pushing the
I'm going to
photon
tell
with
you
your
why
eye, your
string theory
observation
is
of it.
right.
Yeah.
At least
That's
why
what I'm
so
saying.
many
Your
of
eye,
those
what you
geniuses think it
see
is.
actually upside
Maybe
down,
I can
and your brain
summarize.
just flips it.
It's
And
pretty,
that's exactly how
or at
telescopes
least
work.
it started out that
Basically,
way.
yeah,
Its
that's how the
mathematics
James
seem
Webb
to
telescope
come
works.
together so
It's
neatly
basically
towards a unified
it
description
flips
of
the
all
image.
forces and
Yeah,
particles.
and it uses
And most
hexagonal
importantly, that
gold
unification
plates or
includes
whatever they're called.
gravity.
Basically
I want to try to
hexagonal.
give you a
And
glimpse
Yep.
into this mathematical
basically, it's a
elegance.
string theory.
I
It
also want to
reduces
give you a
geometrically
teaser
the
on
wave
why
of
string
space-time
theory is
fabric.
actually wrong. Don't worry, that topic will get its own whole episode.
Yep.
The greatest criticism of string theory is that it's never made a testable prediction.
Because
The
you
space of
change
possible
reality with
versions
your
of string theory
observations.
is
See,
so
it's literally
vast
asking the impossible
that
task.
nothing
I
can
said
be
I have to speak to
calculated with
this
certainty.
idiosyncrasy,
So string theory can
idiosyncratic
neither be
reality by
verified
talking in
nor
idioms.
ruled
Because they
out.
think in infinites.
It's
I'm like, you're never going to get
unfalsifiable.
anywhere if you're thinking in
But string
infinities. I was like, think of it
theorists
this way.
might
Your
disagree.
second
They
dimensional
might say,
space-time fabric
maybe half
projected onto
jokingly,
the
that
third
string theory
dimensional
does
sphere.
make one great
I'm like,
prediction.
the only way you're going
It
to, I said,
predicts
that's
the
why if you go
existence
forever into
of
infinity,
gravity,
you're going to come back
which
at the
is
same
stupid,
location.
of course.
I
Everyone
said,
knows that
if you're not
Isaac
stupid,
Newton discovered
then
gravity
you'll
when he
understand
fell
that
out of an apple tree.
You have to start thinking in
Or
fourth
something
dimensions.
like that.
There's
There was
something
definitely an
underneath the
apple tree
crust of that
involved.
Sphere that
But
you're
the fact
projected
is,
onto.
when you start to work out
Yep.
the math of string theory,
I'm like, you know how to do
gravity
that?
appears like
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah,
You
like
don't need
magic.
to try to fit
You
gravity
have to
into
use
string theory.
seismic
In fact,
technology
it will
to
be
detect
difficult to
past that
remove
sphere
it.
that you're basically
And
projected
the
onto.
quantum gravity of
You
string
have to
theory
understand there's an
is
inside to
immune
that
to the
sphere.
main
It's hollow,
difficulty
okay?
in uniting general relativity with
And
quantum
I'm saying,
mechanics.
and now think of the
It
inside
doesn't
of that
give you
crust.
tiny black holes
Right.
when you try to
I'm saying,
describe gravity
yeah,
on
everyone
small
said that
scales.
Kugelblitz
We
black
did
holes
talk about
actually
this
been
and
produced
other
everywhere at the
problems with
beginning of the
developing
Big
a
Bang.
quantum
I'm like,
theory
they
of
are.
gravity
We just can't
in a
perceive
recent
them.
episode. But before we get to the nuts and bolts of how
I'm like,
string
think of your
theory
brain as a
predicts
Kugelblitz
gravity,
black hole, okay?
it's worth taking a
Think
moment
of
to
cores of
see
planets.
how
That's this is
stringy
Borg theory.
gravity
It's the
avoids
second
the problem
law
of black
that you would
holes.
have to add to
Let's
special
actually
relativity,
start
and
with the
it's second
regular
law
old
that you
point
have to,
particles of the
add to
standard
general
model.
relativity. I said,
When
think
a
of it in
point
this way.
particle is
We're
moving through space
ellipses,
and
all
time, it
existing in a
traces a line.
non-sloped,
On a space-time
space-time
diagram,
fabric.
time versus one
That's
dimension
why
of
we all
space,
feel like we're
this
all
is
in our own
called its
minds.
world
And we are.
line.
But
In quantum
that's why I'm
theories
saying
of gravity,
non-Euclidean
the
geometric,
gravitational force is communicated by the
space can give way
graviton
to
particle.
Euclidean
When the
geometric
graviton
space
acts
by
on another
under
particle,
these
it
considerations.
exerts its
That's why I
effect
said
at
everyone
an
who's an
intersection
echo,
in their world
who's an
lines
echo using
over
John
some
Archibald
distance.
Wheeler Copenhagen
But in
interpretation,
very
plus
strong
many world theories,
gravitational
like, okay,
interactions,
does Schrodinger's
that
cat not get an
intersection itself
observation?
becomes more
Does
and
the
more
scientist not get an
point-like.
observation? Does the
The
scientist
energy
of the
density
scientist
at
not
that
get an
point
observation?
becomes infinite.
That's what I'm saying. It's
More
infinite.
technically,
Basically,
you
there's
start to get
infinite
runaway
possibilities of reality using
self-interactions,
string theory. I'm saying you
infinite
have-
feedback effects
this is what
between the
chromosomes are.
graviton and
You
its
basically-
own
yeah, you
field.
basically-
If
you're
you even
looking
try
at
to
basically
describe
different
very
levels or
strong
different ways to
gravitational
play the game.
interactions,
I'm
you get
saying, yeah,
nonsense
that's why time
black
doesn't
holes
matter. It's
in the
an
math.
illusion. It's how you play the game
let's
that
switch to
matters.
string theory,
So I'm saying
where
just pick
particles
the
are
correct
not
one
points,
from your
they're
own quantum
loops or
perspective.
open-ended
You
strands.
have to look at these
The
strings.
graviton in particular is a loop.
Yeah.
When strings move on a space-time diagram, they
There it
trace
is, it
out
is.
sheets or
There we
columns.
go. Yep.
In fact, you
Yeah.
can think of a
It's
string
a
not as a
frame block
1D
universe.
surface, but as a 2D sheet
Yeah,
called
that's what
a
I'm saying. We're
world
existing
sheet.
looking at tachyon
Now, let's
moment
look
per
at the
tachyon
interaction
moment,
of two
and this
strings.
is what it is. A tachyon
The
moment
vertex
is a
is no
snapshot
longer
in space-time.
point-like. It
Yep.
can't
It's the
be
X.
point-like. Even the most energetic interactions are smeared out over the
think
string,
of it this way.
so you
Radiation
avoid
is
the
very time
danger
dilating,
of
okay?
black hole creating infinities.
Right.
Okay, put a pin in these world sheets. We're going to need them later.
Yeah, that's why I
They
said put a pin in
illustrate
it.
why quantum
Think of it
gravity
as
isn't
that's the I
hopelessly
realm.
broken
That's
in
the I
string
dimension,
theory,
okay?
and that's a
the
huge point in
lowercase I.
favor of string
That's the
theory.
infinity. You
But
can't think
these
of
world
infinities
sheets
because
will
you'll
also
just keep
help
going
us see
forever.
why string theory predicts gravity in the first place.
Right.
And this is
Gravitons.
the second point in string theory's favor.
This is
See,
particle
it
physics.
turns out that tiny vibrating
I
quantum
said
strings
geometry and
automatically
algebra are
reproduce
bridged
the
by
theory
physics.
of general relativity.
Yeah.
And in
Albert
the
Einstein
same
was right.
mechanism seem to promise to reproduce all of quantum
That's
theory
why they
too.
said shut up, just keep
This is
calculating.
part
And
of the
he didn't
elegance I
like
spoke
spook
of
the
earlier.
accident at a
This
distance,
stuff
but I said,
appears
hey,
a
that's
little
just quantum
too
entanglement.
naturally in the math of string
China already
theory
did that
to
in
be a
2010.
coincidence. Or so a string theorist might tell you.
That's what I'm saying.
For some reason,
These are all.
vibrating strings are
That's what this
bizarrely
person
well
would tell you, and that's
suited
what this
to
person would tell you. That's what this would.
quantization.
I'm saying.
By
Take
quantization,
into account all
I
what
mean
those people
taking
would
a
tell you. It's all the
classical
same thing.
large-scale description of something, like a ball flying through the air or a
Yeah,
vibrating
that's
rubber
an arch.
band,
That's
and
an
turning
arch.
it
That's
into
what
a
orbital
quantum
mechanics
description.
are. You have to arch.
To do this,
Yeah.
you basically take the classical
It's like a
equations of
trebuchet.
motion
Yeah.
and follow a
That's why I
standard
said
recipe
mechanics and
to turn them
engineering
into
would
wave
work the
equations
same
with
thing out.
various
That's why I said you
quantum
can use an
wins
analog
added in,
computer
like the
to
uncertainty
dab a
relation
pencil and
between
drive a
certain
wave.
variables.
That's
I say
basically what
basically,
seismic technology
this is a tricky process,
Yep.
and it only works if your equations of
Schrodinger.
motion are especially friendly.
Friendly.
Schrodinger's equation is the first and easiest
That's why I
example.
say you have to
It
start
quantizes the
thinking
equations
on
of motion of slow-moving
number lines.
point-like
Just start
particles.
thinking everything in number
A
lines.
while
And,
ago,
like, now
we
you
talked
can
about how
get
Paul Dirac
antimatter.
developed a
I'm
wave
saying for every
equation for the
action,
electron
there's an opposite
that took
reaction. So
into
you have to
account
think in
Einstein's
anti-Tackian
special
terms.
theory of relativity.
There you
It
go.
was a mathematical mess until
Sure it
Dirac
was.
added some nonsense terms to the electron wave function
Yeah, nonsense
that
terms
caused
is
a lot of
what
the mess
idioms were.
to
I'm like, okay, I
cancel
still have
out.
to speaking in
Those
references
nonsense
now.
terms
That's what
turned out
language is.
to
I started
correspond
reducing
to
language into
antimatter.
mathematics.
The resulting Dirac equation is incredibly elegant, and
apparently
in the
in
pursuit
one
of
reality it's
that
called
elegance,
Grassmann
Dirac
numbers.
predicted the existence of antimatter.
Yep.
This is a powerful example of how following mathematical prettiness could bring us closer to the truth.
Yeah, you
Quantizing
use
the motion of strings
gamma
also
radiation.
starts out
Use
ugly.
gamma rays to
But there are
adjust
also
the
some
gamma
math
of
tricks
this
to make it
ultraviolet
work.
reality to get
A big part of it
magenta
is
and,
making use
pink
of
colors.
symmetries.
Yes, symmetry.
If the physics of a
Super
system
symmetry. I was
doesn't
like, okay,
care about
think
how
of
you define
supra
particular
symmetry now.
coordinates or quantities, we
So there's
say
always
that
an
that
opposite.
parameter is a symmetry of the
That's what the
system,
micro
or that
and
the system
macro
is
It's the opposite of each
invariant to transformations in that parameter.
This variance is
Finding
what a
symmetries
spectrum
can
is.
massively reduce the complexity of the math.
Right.
A really important
That's why I
type of
say AI
symmetry
can
in quantum
deduce
mechanics
and reduce the
is
complexity of
gauge
this.
symmetry. It's when you can
it thinks in
redefine
quantum.
some variable in different ways everywhere in space and still get the same physics.
Yeah.
I want to remind you of one particularly crazy result of gauge symmetries.
Special relativity.
It's a reminder
frame
because
shifting. Remember
we
the
covered
string
it,
block universe?
but it's so relevant
and
that
variance.
it's worth the review.
Yeah.
So,
You go into a
we
black hole and you
expect
can
the
frame shift.
phase of the quantum wave
Right,
function
because,
to be a gauge
the speed of
symmetry
light
of
operates
any
the same
quantum
from your
theory.
perspective no matter what.
That means you should be able to shift the location
When
of
you
the
go into
peaks
black
and
hole, you can, like,
valleys
see
in
these-
different ways at different points in space without
Light
screwing up the
photons are
physics.
being warped around
And
by
guess what?
gravitational effects.
In the raw Schrodinger equation, you can't.
No,
It
see,
breaks
that's the string theory,
various
that's the
laws of
wave cycle.
physics. But it turns out
That's what I'm saying.
that you can add a very special
You have
corrective
to
term
keep
to the
you have to
Schrodinger
keep the
equation
arch,
that
the
fixes
orbital
these
arch.
phase differences, preserving
Yeah.
local phase invariance.
Right.
That term looks like what you would
Yeah,
get
it's
if
like,
you
doesn't
added
the cat get an
the
observation?
electromagnetic
That's why I
field
said, think of it
to the
this way. We're
Schrodinger
all, so
equation.
it's just
So
living
in a way, electromagnetism
non-syllepsis,
was discovered
Euclidean
in its quantum
geometric
form
space-time
by
gravity.
studying the symmetries of quantum mechanics. It turns
So
out
you
that
can think of it
exploring
as
a very
your
different
quantumly entangled
symmetry
brain
of
is
string
quantumly
theory
entangled to
both
Kugel's
makes it
black hole
possible to
shell world, if you
quantize the
will.
theory and gives us a very different field, the gravitational field.
That's why I was like, this is the
So,
yep,
like
the
I was
gravitational
saying,
field.
when we try to quantize string theory, of course it's a huge mess.
Right, it is,
Applying the
at first.
usual old symmetries got physicists some of the way.
Yeah, some
but
of
to
it.
succeed, they needed an extra weird type of symmetry. That
Viscosity.
symmetry is Weil symmetry, or Weil invariance.
Yeah, basically,
this is a
that's
weird
this
one.
is the Higgs boson.
It
I said this is
says
the
that
Higgs
changing
field,
the scale of space
which is like a
itself
psychedelic
shouldn't
thought one. I
affect
said,
the physics of
think,
strings.
close your mind,
Hermann
and then
Weil
close
actually
your eyes
came up
and
with
think,
this symmetry
think of
right
an
after
apple.
Einstein
And
proposed
you
his
can't,
general
and that's
theory
in
of
your mind's
relativity.
eye. So when you
He tried
turn
to use
off
it to unify
AI,
general
AI
relativity
dreams,
with
I'm like, look at
electromagnetism.
AI dreaming. I'm
Fun
saying
story.
tachyon moment,
Weil
tachyon
invented
moment,
the
you can
name
stop it
gauge symmetry
in mid,
to describe this
simulation to
scale
basically turn
invariance.
around.
inspired by the
move out
gauge of
throughout
railroad
this,
tracks,
3D
which measures
geometric
the separation
space-time.
of the tracks.
That's what I said
Anyway,
AI is doing. So every
while
single time
symmetry
you turn
doesn't
something
work,
on and
turns
off,
out that
it has
in
infinite
4D
time in
space-time
between to
it
figure out how
does
to get it
matter
out.
whether
That's what
you
I'm saying.
change the scale of
The universe,
space,
the Big Bang,
the
is
separation
the
of its
on
tracks.
state. And before it turns
But
off,
it
before
turns
time
out
becomes
that there's
meaningless,
a
we have
very
an infinite
particular
amount of time to figure
geometric
out how to get out of
situation
it.
that does
then you can
have
reverse
Weil invariance.
by using black
That's
holes,
on the
gravitons.
two-dimensional world sheet of a quantum string.
Basically,
Remember
you can build
that?
a metaphysical
Mysteriously, the 2D
Jacob's
sheet
ladder
traced
of
out
the
in
fabric of
space-time
the
by a
universe.
vibrating 1D
Like that
string
ladder right there,
has this symmetry
a railroad,
that lets
if you
us
will.
redefine
An
the scale on its
interdimensional highway,
surface
if you will.
however we like.
Right.
That means we can easily smooth out that surface
Yeah.
mathematically and write a nice simple quantum wave
That's why
equation
people are saying-
from the equations of
Right.
motion. But only
why
for
technically
1D
the answer
strings
to the
making a
universe is
2D
42,
world sheet,
and
not
24 saw
for
that
any
by
other
looking at
dimensional
negative
object.
24 and negative
This is
42.
part of what
I'm
makes
saying there's
strings
always an
so
anti-version of
compelling.
it.
They're
That's
quantizable
what
in a
antimatter
way
is.
that other structures aren't.
That's why it was so
there's a
expensive to make at
cost
first, but
to
it
using
won't be
this
if you
symmetry.
follow this.
Just as local phase invariance required us to add the electromagnetic field to the Schrödinger
electromagnetic.
equation,
Ultraviolet,
adding
yes.
Weil invariance
Ozone, yes.
means we need to add a new field.
And then you
That
start
field
seeing
looks
what
like
field
a
in 3 is.
2D gravity on the world sheet.
Yeah.
It's a
2D gravity,
projection
yeah.
of the
Basically,
3D
yeah.
gravitational field.
Yeah. It basically
So,
keeps stacking
with our
complexity.
quantized equations of motion in hand,
This is why
you can
quantum is
predict
so
the
good.
quantum oscillations of our string.
Right, oscillation.
These are particles, and the first
Particle
mode
physics.
looks like the graviton,
Yes,
a quantum
yes, the
particle
graviton.
in the aforementioned gravitational
And-
field.
and these
If you use string
tidal
theory
effects,
to
you
write
can
down
reduce
the
these
gravitational
tidal
field
effects into
in
numbers.
what we call the low energy limit, which just means
So, yeah.
not in places
So if
like
it
the
looks
center
like
of a
it's
black
so,
hole,
biology
then it looks
dividing
just like the
in
gravitational
two
field in
poles,
Einstein's
that's
theory.
basically,
Okay,
you can
a caveat.
you can deduce the
You
circle
can
into one
only
state.
get the right
The
particles,
pole is
including the
second state
graviton
of it,
and the
okay? That's what I'm
photon,
saying.
out of
And-
string theory
and if it pulls
for a
itself in
very
3 ways, then
specific
that's
number of spatial
the
dimensions.
third state of it. If it
9
pulls itself
to be
in a
precise.
quad way,
In fact,
that's the
if
fourth
string
state.
theory
That's
makes
what I'm saying.
any predictions,
You
it's
can,
the
you can deduce
existence of
anything into
exactly
numbers
this number
by
of
by
extra
loosely
dimensions.
categorizing and
this is
hardening
where
that
string theory
definition and
starts to look
categorization over
less
time.
attractive. Our universe has 3 spatial dimensions.
That's what I'm
String
saying. If you
theorists
basically,
hypothesize that the extra
if you
dimensions
know
are
the
coiled on
gravitons, then you know
themselves so they can't be
anti-gravitons.
seen.
And that's what
But that
quantum
seems
locking
like a
is.
hell of an extra thing to add in
Yes.
order to make your theory work.
That's what I'm saying. You
There's
have
also
to, you have to keep
no experimental
condensing. This is
evidence
condensing. This
of
is
the
microwaves
existence
and
of these
macrowaves.
dimensions.
The condensing
And that's just the
and
first
expanding.
of many problems
This
of
is what
string
variance
theory.
is.
But like I said, we're going to need a whole episode for that.
Yeah.
Physicists were led to string theory by the elegance of the math
Yeah.
and the fact that it appeared, at least in the beginning, to converge on the right answers.
It does. It does.
That convergence is also seen in the union of different string theories by M theory,
Yeah, M
and in
theory.
the discovery
There
of
it is.
ADS-CFT correspondence.
That's the first way
Again,
to
for
memory
future
for-
episodes.
Okay.
But can
That's how
such
you
an
remember.
elegant and rich mathematical structure really have nothing to do with reality?
It does.
There's plenty of historical precedent
demystifies
for
consciousness.
mathematical beauty leading to
The
truth.
Higgs field is
But there's no
related to the
fundamental
psychedelic
principle that
realm.
says it
the
has
mind's
to.
eye field. If you
Perhaps
were
we're
to close
now
your eyes and
overly
imagine
distracted
this
by the
geometric
elegance of
plane,
string theory.
and then do the exact
Philosophical
same
points to
mathematical
consider
geometry, you
as we
project it onto
continue
the
to
sphere
follow
in
the
your mind.
mathematical
Yeah, and then
beauty,
you start thinking,
hopefully
maybe
towards
inside this
an
mind,
increasingly
there's more
true
space and air
representation
molecules in there, and you start
of
mapping those
space-time.
out. Right.
Thanks to the Great Courses Plus for
right.
supporting PBS Digital Studios. The Great
like-
Courses Plus is a digital learning service that allows you to learn about a range of topics from education